Hey everybody, welcome back. A short turnaround this time. I'll talk if you'll listen, episode 39. It's 39 and we're almost at the 40 mark. Hopefully we'll be hitting it before this week is out, as I've been inspired. Very, very inspired, very motivated. I'm in the creative buzz. I'm in the creative high right now. I really appreciate everyone who has helped me get to this point, and it's long overdue. I should have kind of been hitting the ground running as soon as this whole stay at home / quarantine / pandemic thing happened, but I can sit here and wish what could have been, or I can kind of make this the new beginning. This is the new beginning. This is the new chapter. So don't be surprised if you see, a couple of episodes in the same week. Don't be surprised if you see a lot of content coming out over shorter periods of time, and you all are the reason for that. So I just want to thank you for that first and foremost. But the biggest chunk that, the biggest reason, a big chunk of the reason that I am putting out this episode is because of a very, very close dear friend of mine. So a dear friend of mine that I went to high school with, I initially met this friend when I want to say I was in 10th grade. So we're talking over 10 years ago at this point, which some of you who haven't been out of high school for 10 years are probably looking and at that going, wow, 10 years is creeping up on me, or calling me an old head. Some of you who have been out of high school for decades are probably laughing at me right now. And I'm sure you can all reminisce when you got out of high school and the friends and family that you no longer speak with, no longer talk to, and now you do. Now you speak with them, or vice versa. Maybe you don't anymore. But this friend I met way back when in 10th grade, and we were really close, but for the past couple of years, life just took us in different ways. Life took us in different areas, and it's not necessarily that we had any animosity or any beef or anything like that. And even if we did, things, as you get older, you start to realize, like, hey, this ain't that serious. This ain't that big of a deal. But this friend and I, we just, went, different lives, different career paths, lived in different parts of the city, just different things going on. And I had a huge slice of humble pie because she reached out to me and just wanted to talk, just wanted to catch up via video chat. And we were talking via video chat, and she said she's been listening to the podcast for a little over a year. And I had no idea because, mind you, we haven't spoken, and I want to say about 3 or 4 years. And for her to kind of listen for over a year, it really meant a lot to me. And she said the last episode 38, if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to it, stop what you're doing right now, go back and listen. But she tuned into that episode, and it motivated her, encouraged her to reach out to me. And that was a huge slice of humble pie for me, because from one end to, you all heard me mention last week that some of the most proudest moments over the course of me recording this podcast, me recording this show, is when my friends, you all, the majority of my audience are my friends, the people I know personally, reach out to me and tell me how much they like the show or appreciate the show, or even just a little critique me from here and there. Hey, I think you say this a lot, or you should do this, or hey, I really like it when you did that. Those are some of the most awesome. I'm at my proudest when I get feedback from listeners of the show that are tangible. These are people that I see, I can reach out and touch, and it just was a huge slice of humble pie for me. And we talked for 3 hours, over 3 hours. She made a joke and said Amistad wasn't even that long. So it was, we had a good time. And if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to last week's episode 38, I encourage you to do so, because you could never know. You never know. I mean, we hit the ground running without missing a beat. That's just the type of friendship and chemistry we have. But you'll never know, like, that one friend that, you were friends with in high school, or that you used to work with or work for, or went to church with, or, went to the mosque with, or it just engaged with them in some capacity, and then life just took you a separate way. And then next thing you know, you reach out to them and you just rekindle potentially, especially now more than ever, a friendship, an old friendship that you realize never truly died, never truly went away or went anywhere in the first place. And you find yourself rekindling something that you've been longing for and maybe didn't even know it. So she reached out to me and we had a great conversation. We talked about so many different topics, from music to race to culture, to relationships to communication. And it was just a very fulfilling relationship. And one of my favorite parts about being a Mason is interacting with people who do not take conversation and social interaction for granted. And I think that was one of those moments that I could definitely, I know I just felt fulfilled. I just felt fulfilled. And sometimes I would sit back and look at my lodge brothers and go, wow, all of every single conversation that you have just seems to be so meaningful, or at least you genuinely appreciate it. You learn to appreciate it. And when I was talking to my friend of over 10 years now at this point, just to rekindle those old feelings and thoughts it was just lovely. So shout out to that friend. She's listening, and I really appreciate not only you, but I appreciate your friendship. A couple of things that we talked about that I really want to expose you all to and really get your feedback on is being introspective. There was a point in the conversation where we spoke about friendship, and oftentimes there are so many different levels of friendship where you have people that you love but you don't like, so you don't really communicate with them as often as maybe you should, or maybe they should communicate with you, but you love them and that connection is always there and it's going to be constant communication. And then you have those friends that you can't get enough of. You love them. I just came over from two very, very close friends' a house, and my face lit up in seeing them. And you usually have those types of relationships, but with friendship in general, you usually come up with this idea or this definition of what friendship is and what it means. And oftentimes we don't realize how out of sync our definition of friendship is with the people that we form these relationships and these bonds with. And I find it so astounding. What I mean by that is you could be the type of person where you base your friendship off of time spent. So you value your friendship on time spent. However much time and exposure you can get with that friend or that group of friends, that is how you define your friendship. And if time goes by to where you can't interact with them, you can't talk with them, you can't socialize and fraternize with them, then that friendship starts to taper off. And then there's other people who they base their friendship off of gifts given, or words of affirmation, like the 5 love languages, right? These different things that you base your friendship on, where, hey, we can be friends for 10 years, but I hate your guts because you never called me and wished me a happy birthday, or you never once said how much our friendship means to you, or you never once said, or never got me a gift for my birthday or for a holiday or whatever. There are a lot of people out there who base their friendship and define their friendship on these things. And what they don't realize is they never have that two-way conversation with the people that they call their closest friends. And there was a point in time where my friend mentioned that she really took a step back about all the people in her life, current people and distant people, where she said she really started to evaluate the type of friend that she wanted to be to other people. And that really hit home for me, because oftentimes we take a look at it and we go, what type of friend is this person to me? And we don't really take enough time to really say, like, hey, what type of friend am I to not only this person in particular, but just in general? How do my friends see me? Do I want to be that reliable friend? Do I want to be that friend that's always there in the clutch? Do I always want to be in the trenches? Do I want to be that friend from a distance? Do I want to love them from a distance? And to everyone watching and listening right now, you all know we do have those friends that we have to love from a distance. we can't be that type of friend to that person the same way we're that type of friend to that other person or that other friend. So it really opened things up for me. So if any of you all take what I say and let it digest and sit and think about it, I strongly encourage you to just take a step back, even if it's for 30 minutes, if it's for an hour, if it's for a day, however long you need it to be, or however long you want to tolerate it. Just take a step back and think, what type of friend am I? And answer honestly. Would you want to be a friend to you? Could you be your own friend? And I know it's really easy to take a step back and go, oh yeah, I'm a great friend. I always call on birthdays. I always give gifts. I always pay for dinner dates. I always buy shots. I always do this. I always do that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have that open conversation with yourself on what type of friend you want to be, you could find yourself being the type of friend that someone else wants you to be. I had a really, really deep and introspective conversation with my buddy Chuck today. And you all know Chuck. I've mentioned Chuck dozens of times. One of my closest friends. And we talked about knowing ourselves and who we are and not letting other people's definition of what friendship is influence our behavior uncharacteristically. So what does that mean? That means if you know that you're not a phone call person, you know you can't pick up the phone and talk, but you know you're great at texting, then you better be the best damn texter on God's green earth. And just use that as an opportunity to increase your relationship and mold your relationship around texting. Don't let another person's definition of how a friend communicates dictate your behavior. Of course, there's always compromise. Of course, there's always situations where you got to find a middle ground. That's what growth is, right? Growing into a new, more mature, a better person, a more open-minded person. Of course, certain habits and things are going to change. Your opinion, your perspective, especially as you get in relationships and you form new relationships, you climb the corporate ladder maybe, or you start a family even, your communication is going to change. And maybe you will become that phone person as opposed to the texter, or some people are more face-to-face in person. But it's really important that you know that about yourself. You don't want to set yourself up for failure, and you don't want to create these false expectations for the people that you have relationships with. So it was a very, very deep conversation, and I admire her and respected her so much for even bringing that up and for even saying that, because it's so true. We spend so much time and put so much effort into what other people, the type of friend or communicator or family member that other people want us to be. We have to take a step back and think to ourselves, what type of friend do I want to be? What type of communicator do I want to be? And what am I good at? What do I do poorly? These things are very essential for you to know. Otherwise, you can't improve. You can't get better, and you can't be the best friend that you want to be. So I encourage you all to definitely pick up the phone and maybe have those conversations with some of your closest friends. Hey, what type of friend am I? Hey, what type of friend do you expect me to be? And hey, do I do this well? Do I do this poorly? And you'd be surprised what type of feedback you may get, especially if you have those friends who, as the kids say, keep it 100, or as they say in the hood, keep it a bean. And they give you unfiltered, or even if it is filtered, but just honest, raw feedback that you definitely need to hear. So with that, I'm going to take a step away. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to interact with some of my viewers on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back momentarily. Okay, everyone, I'm back, and I appreciate you bearing with me while I check on the viewers here. And you can get on the action too. I think, like I mentioned last episode, this will be a very regular thing. So if you follow me on Instagram, even if you don't know me personally, my Instagram is public. So feel free to follow me on Instagram and just interact with me on this level, because it helps the topics to remain living and breathing. So Do appreciate that. If you're a friend, a dear friend of mine, and you are a Facebook friend of mine, feel free to tune in on Facebook as well. I simulcast them. I display them and broadcast them on at the same time, so you won't be missing a beat. Another thing of the friend that I spoke with a couple of days ago and I talked about was race and culture and how oftentimes they're confused. And we had a very, very open, honest relationship. And this may be a sensitive topic for some, and I definitely don't want to alienate anyone. But we had a very introspective conversation about race. And it seems to be the topic of the weekend because I just had another deep conversation about racism and prejudice and discrimination with my close friend. And there's a lot of confusion around those topics. But one thing that we keyed in on over this past couple of days, or at least the topic that I keyed in on personally, was being ignorant, knowing where you're ignorant, and willful ignorance. So my friend and I had a really deep conversation about different historical events and why maybe the baby boomer generation or the Gen X of African Americans, Black people, people of African descent, however you choose to categorize yourself or your ethnic background, why they may feel a certain way about non-Black people, specifically white people, compared to maybe somebody from Gen Y or Gen Z or millennials or, whatever classification you choose to give it. And it's all about experience. Everyone's a byproduct of their experience. Me and my big bro all the time, we sit down and we talk about how I haven't lived through or experienced certain things. So it's tough for me to comprehend or even empathize with certain experiences that someone who maybe lived through the, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s as a Black man, as a Black woman, as someone who's seeking opportunity, as a person of color. And on the flip side of things, why people from, in some cases Gen X and of course millennials in general kind of inherit the emotions or thought process or perception from their parents and grandparents. And there's always pros and cons to all of this. And speaking of ignorance and everything, what we talked about is you usually have three groups of people. And this is a broad generalization and it's potentially an oversimplification. But you usually have three types of people. The first type is the non-Black, where they don't know about the Black person's experience because how could they, especially if they are isolated from the Black community, whether that be you're in a primarily white neighborhood, whether that you're in a primarily white state or city or township or whatever the case may be. You don't have the opportunity to interact with Black people, so that it's not even in your monkey sphere, right? It's not even in your thought process. You're not even considering that. Then you have the other end of the spectrum where whether you want to call this type of Black person conscious or informed, I like to use the word educated or aware, where this Black person is, regardless of their feelings, they're very educated. They're very well aware of the different racist and discriminatory acts of history. My friend spoke about oftentimes how often do you remember the first image of a Black person that you see in any of your history classes is that of a slave. It's not, kingdoms. It's not, any other form of wealth or prosperity. First image you see or hear about is slavery. And then eventually you get to the civil rights movement and the Blacks' involvement in the Revolutionary War and an Emancipation Proclamation, all the Black Panthers, all these other things you eventually get to. But the first image that's usually presented to you is that of enslavement. And so things like that this type of category of person, this Black person, is very conscious, very aware, and far from ignorant. But then the type of person that most people choose to overlook or don't want to talk about is the person in the middle, and that's the uninformed Black person. And very admittedly and humbly so, I will group myself or categorize myself to a degree in that last category. And it's a tough position to be in. And it was a very vulnerable conversation between my friend and I. And pretty much what we discussed was, when you are black and you're ignorant and you don't know your history, you're not aware of it, you find yourself in a tough spot because in some cases, you don't know where to look. You don't know where to start. It's so overwhelming. It's so much information at one time. You may not necessarily know where to begin at, or what's significant, what's fabricated, what's not, what's exaggerated, what's not. And then you find yourself kind of in this sandwich. You're the meat of the sandwich, where you have the uninformed non-black person who comes to you with curiosities and questions, and whether it's from a place of ignorance and prejudice or it's from a place of sincerity, you're ill-equipped to answer the question. You're ill-equipped to give a well-informed response. Hey, why is it offensive, outside of just violating someone's personal space, to reach for, a black woman's or black man's hair and ask if it's real or if it's a wig? Why is that offensive? And you may not necessarily feel the same way because you're uninformed of the systematic history there, where you go, you potentially could progress a false narrative where you go, I don't know what the big deal is, I'm not sure. Or maybe it's just about personal space and it's not about race. On the other side of that, conversely, you find yourself talking to a conscious or well-informed or a person of color that's very well aware, and they almost talk to you, they shun you or talk to you in a condescending way because you don't know. What do you mean you don't know about the Black Panthers? What do you mean you don't know about Malcolm X? What do you mean you don't know about the West Philadelphia bombing? What do you mean you don't know about, Frederick Douglass or Maya Angelou or, the first black astronaut? All these different things, they almost kind of look down their nose at you and in a way discourage you from, like, oh man, now I can't go and be informed, or not necessarily go and be informed, or maybe I can't have this dialogue with you because you're looking at me as lesser now. I'm not as informed as you. I'm not as educated as you. So you find yourself between a rock and a hard place. You find yourself maybe not being in let's just say, a better equipped position to have enlightened discussion with that non-black person to educate them on why maybe they shouldn't reach for that person of color's hair. Maybe they shouldn't say, hey, if he was innocent, why was he running then? If they asking questions, hey, why do you feel that the police are out to get you, et cetera, et cetera. You're not from an enlightened position to defend those things. And now you can't have a dialogue with the brother or the sister that is informed because you feel like you're being judged or ridiculed. So to all those people out there who maybe feel like they fall into that category, I will say, trust me, you do know somebody who's informed about all of these things that maybe won't look down their nose at you. My friend that I was speaking to said something that truly touched my heart and touched my spirit. And she said, whenever she came across somebody who kind of looked down their nose at her and scoffed at her and say, what do you mean you don't know about this? She kind of came back at them and looked at them and said, you know why I don't know. Generally speaking, you know how our education system is. You know the type of content that we're being fed. I don't know primarily for the same reason you didn't know at one point. And I think that's a great counter argument to come up with. So for everyone who finds themselves in a position way in the middle, I encourage you to pick somebody and just do a quick Google search, find a book. If you have an Audible subscription, maybe post on Facebook or Twitter, hey, what are some popular books to read? And just use that as motivation and opportunity to become educated and informed. And it doesn't necessarily have to be even if you're, a non-black person, or you're not a person of color, take the opportunity to be informed, educate yourself, and pick somewhere. All great journeys have a starting point, and it may not be too late to start for you. You can sit here and go, man, I should have started 10, 20 years ago. But don't wait from 10 years from now to say, hey, I should have started 10 years ago. Let today be a new beginning. And you do know somebody. There is one person who you're very, very close with, and say, hey, I was listening on a podcast about the West Philadelphia bombing, or hey, I heard about the Black Panthers, and I know who they are. If you guys hear fireworks in the background, my apologies, just bear with me here. But there are certain groups that you heard about. There are certain directors, certain activists, certain philanthropists that you heard about that maybe you don't necessarily know where to start at. So I encourage you to have a conversation with somebody that you know and trust. And for those stuck in the middle who you find yourself getting questions from, whether it be a white person or a non-black person asking about things that they had a black friend or black coworker, and their black friend or black coworker was offended or got bothered by an action that they did, tell you like, hey, whether this bothers me or not, I want you to know that I'm not the spokesperson for all black people. So this person may have felt offended and had a good reason for it. Don't use my answer as justification for your behavior. You're coming to me for my opinion. So just some advice out there for everybody who maybe have experienced things like that. And I think it takes, not to toot my own horn, but I do think it takes a bit of guts to say that you're uninformed, especially in a world where people are picking groups of people to attack and to judge. I think it takes a special kind of person to say, well, hey, I don't know. How about you educate me? Or how about you point me in the right direction? How about you help me help myself? And I think that's takes a lot of tenacity. So don't let anybody knock you off your square. Don't let anybody make you feel bad for being uninformed, because at one point in time they didn't know either. So there's that. I'm gonna take a quick break, everybody, to check up on my Facebook and Instagram followers, and I'll be back in a moment. So one of the last topics that I did want to touch on is something that I'm going through personally. And I try to be as vulnerable with my audience as I can be without letting too many sensitive topics out or exposing too many personal feelings, especially when it comes to other people, when there are other people involved. Especially for me, I try to be open in certain aspects about my relationship, and I talk to you all about my relationship, and I got to be conscious that I'm not the only one in my relationship, especially for the people who listen, who do know the person that I'm in a relationship with. So you definitely got to be conscious about things like that. You definitely don't want to be unintentionally overly revealing. But for me personally, as far as I'm concerned, so for those of you who have been listening for a while and who have known me for a while, now I'm really, really big on therapy. And I think therapy and mental health in general is a necessity, especially for you to grow as a person. And I have a therapy appointment scheduled for this upcoming week. And I'm really excited for it. I'm no stranger to therapy, but I can say that I'm not used to it. I haven't had it often enough to where it's a norm for me, and I'm looking forward to a point in life where I can say that it's normal, or even if I can just, financially afford it, because sometimes therapy can be really expensive. But that being said, I do have therapy coming up, and I'm really excited about it. And the reason I'm so excited is I'm looking forward to see what opportunities I have for communication. I think men and women communicate differently, regardless of culture or creed or upbringing. Men and women at our core, we just communicate differently. And I'm looking for some opportunities to grow in my area of communication, and understanding that just because someone is a great communicator doesn't mean that they communicate greatly with a person specifically or a person in particular. So I'm looking for opportunities. This whole quarantine thing has been rough on the relationship in general in some areas, and I definitely don't want to be dramatic here. It's definitely not reality show worthy, but there are some areas that have taken a bit of a hit, and in order to fix something together, you have to be in a position where you can fix something by yourself. And I want to make sure I'm on my P's and Q's and I'm good to go before we go and sit down and have some tough conversations. And I never want to put myself in a position where I'm blaming someone else for a reaction that may be rooted or seated in something else. I always want to give my girlfriend the benefit of the doubt, and if and when I can help it. Obviously, you find yourself in times where you're not thinking or considering a certain thing or thought or feeling. You also find yourself in a situation where you are reacting emotionally, and it may not be a rational explanation to what you're thinking or feeling. So you react emotionally, and you're left picking up the pieces lately. You can also find yourself in a situation, which I think is an angle that oftentimes gets overlooked is you can find yourself in a situation where you put your emotions on a back burner because you feel like you're being overly emotional or you're being dismissive or inconsiderate of the other person's emotions. So you put your own emotions on a back burner. You put your own thoughts and feelings on a back burner. And I'd be sitting here telling a story if I said I didn't fall into that category sometimes, where again, I don't want to alienate any of my audience or, any of my viewers or listeners, but, as a man, sometimes you feel like you're in a relationship for the woman. And sometimes you don't feel like you're in it together. Sometimes you feel like you're there solely for her, to build her up and to make her a better person and be as supportive as you need to be. And I think sometimes your own emotions, thoughts, and feelings take a backseat to that, intentionally or unintentionally or otherwise. You find yourself putting her thoughts and feelings first because you feel like that's what you have to do as a man. That's how you value your worth. Like that's where you place your worth in. That's how you value your ability to be a good boyfriend, fiance, significant other, husband. And you feel like my feelings don't matter as much as hers. So, or his, depending on what type of relationship you're in. And I need to take a back seat so that way she has an opportunity to express herself. And if that happens too often, you find yourself where you're not voicing your opinion, you're not saying what's on your mind, and you're not openly communicating. And next thing you know, communication can turn destructive or unproductive, and you find yourself in a really sticky situation. The biggest reason that I'm going to therapy is I want to make sure that I'm putting all the effort into not only hearing her emotions and being receptive to her feelings, but also being in a place where I can express myself adequately. Her and I, we come from two different places, and we both know this, but I think sometimes we're in denial about it, and I think sometimes we feel like we're in this fantasy world where it's like, hey, it'll work out, and we put things that we should probably talk about off to the side because we categorize them as like temporary. Like, hey, this is just in the moment. This will pass. And yeah, it'll pass, but it'll come back too. And we're so different. I want to make sure I'm putting in an effort to communicate in a way where we can both benefit. You all are going to think this is silly. This is going to sound really, really silly, but I have a very, very recent story as an example of how different we are. I can easily sit here and say, I'm a gamer, she's not. I can easily sit here and say, I didn't come from a close family, she did. I can easily sit here and say, I grew up in a dense urban environment and she grew up in the suburbs. And for some, that might be enough. But here's one very small, trivial, and simple example of how different we are. So based on my experience and where I come from and whether you say culturally or just, where I lived at, we called food certain things. So if I say hot sausage or mild sausage, anyone who grew up in a dense urban neighborhood or grew up like I did, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The image is very vivid in your mind right now. If I say mild sausage, I'm talking about a pack of 8 or 16 sausages that look like hot dogs. It comes in a pack that looks like it's a hot dog pack. And it's very popular at cookouts. You throw them on the grill, you grill them up, you separate them from, mild and spicy, and you call it a day. Anything else that's like an Italian sausage, we call it exactly that. We call it an Italian sausage. We call it a kielbasa, or whatever the name of the sausage is, we'll call it that. So earlier today, we were going on a grocery run, and I told her that, hey, I was grilling today. I grilled today, and I said, hey, can you go and pick up some hot sausages? And in her mind, she's thinking like Italian sausages. And for the first time in my life, I had to break down what I meant. And I know on the surface that seems silly, but that's the most recent example that I can give of just the disconnect and how different we are. And I think sometimes we very unfairly key in on the way we communicate. And that's where the buck stops. So I'm saying what I'm saying. I'm expecting you to know what I'm saying. I'm expecting you to understand what I'm saying 100% of the time. And screw the fact that we grew up in different places. Screw the fact that we are coming from different cultural backgrounds. You should know what I mean when I say it. And that's not fair. And I'm hoping that therapy can at least help me help myself communicate better and try to be more conscious of those things. And I think one of the things that I can do is when she says something to me, I say, because it usually doesn't happen to after the fact, but I should try to do it in the moment. Well, I say, okay, when you say this, this is how I'm hearing it. And I know that might seem like extra, and it may be very excessive. But hey, if I got to do that for a week, if I got to do that for a month, if I got to do that for half a year, for us to get on the same page and the relationship can grow, then I'm all for it. I never want to be put in a position where I feel like I just gave up on something and I didn't give it my all. So I definitely I'm looking forward to this therapy. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to grow in my communicative skills. And I'm looking forward to just getting to know her better. I mean, sometimes you could be with somebody for, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years and maybe not know them quite like you should. So I'm definitely going to take the opportunity to get to know myself a little bit better and see where I can improve, not only as a boyfriend, but as a man. I'm really looking forward to that. But it's really important you get on that same page. I mean, this is probably some of the conversations that maybe we should have had, early on before we moved in together. But hey, better late than never, right? I know some would say, hey, better never late, but I go by better late than never. And I'd rather have these conversations now than a year from now. I mean, it'd be real easy for me to say, I wish I had these conversations, a year or 2 or 3 years ago. But I don't want to be in a position where I'm having a conversation a year from now. And sometimes you do have repetitive conversations. Sometimes the conversations are a bit redundant, but at least they can evolve and you can hit a deeper or a newer level of whatever the issue is versus having a discussion for the first time. So I am looking forward to that. I'm hoping that she is as open to healthy confrontation as I am. I mean, she's no stranger to confrontation, I'll tell you that. But hopefully the confrontation can be positive, it can be productive, and it can help us grow. But that's all I got, y'all. I really wanted to just tune in, check in, and really share this conversation that I've had with a couple of friends recently, or one as recent as today, a couple of hours ago. I came from their place, came here, and pretty much popped the episode on and started recording. So, and the other friend I spoke to a couple of days ago. And shout out to everybody that's listening. And one last thing I want to say before I let you all go, before I tune out, is I genuinely do appreciate everyone who has supported me from day one, from day 10, from a year ago, whatever the case may be. I truly appreciate it. It puts a huge smile on my face knowing that I'm providing you content that you enjoy. It puts a huge smile on my face to know that it's compelling, and I can't do this without you. And I really appreciate some of your times, a slice of your time, and any friends that you feel that would benefit from the show. Feel free to pass it along. The more the merrier. And I do have some stuff in the works, so keep an eye out for that. And I'm really excited to bring it to you all as well. With that being said, I'll let you all go. It's always a pleasure. And as always, I'll keep talking if you'll listen. Take care.